is the King of Kings, and to his kingdom come, on earth as it is in heaven. One holy nation, under our Heavenly Father, grace, mercy, justice for all.
American Family News, almost a view. A private survey finds there was solid job growth last month. Jerry Bodlander reports.
A day ahead of the government's report, the survey by payroll processor ADP showed 237,000 private sector jobs were added in June. About half that amount, 120,000, was by companies with fewer than 50 employees. This is Moody's Analytics chief economist Mark Zandi.
Small businesses have been lagging in terms of their job creation. That's no longer the case. They are adding very aggressively.
The survey found retail, shipping, and utility companies added 50,000 jobs, while construction companies added another 19,000. Jerry Bodlander, Washington.
There has been concern about a possible terrorist strike on the United States this 4th of July, with government agencies even advising people in recent days to be on alert. Ryan Morrow is the terrorism analyst for the Clarion Project. He tells Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth that July 4th does not hold any special significance for ISIS over any other day, but it does fall this year during Ramadan.
During Ramadan, and all Muslims believe this, acts that are voluntary but good suddenly become obligatory. The ones that are obligatory, you have to do much more of. So you have to be more devout. ISIS then takes that Islamic teaching and they say what that means is that the obligation upon you to engage in jihad is 10 times greater during this month of Ramadan than at any other point in the year. But if you die carrying out jihad, then the reward is 10 times greater.
The head of a Christian accreditation agency says never in history has trust been so attacked on a daily basis. Bill Bumpus explains.
And because of that, Dan Busby, president of Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability, says those who lead and serve in Christ-centered ministries need to be intentional about building and maintaining trust. He has a new book out entitled Trust, the Firm Foundation for Kingdom Fruitfulness.
My premise in the book is simple, that Christ-centered ministries with trusted governance, trusted resource raising, and trusted resource management experience elevated kingdom outcomes, and without trust, our efforts for the king are simply impaired, and so trust is essential.
Busby states that it's critical for ministries to avoid even the appearance of a conflict of interest.
I think back to John Wesley's quote when he said, our responsibility is to give the world the right impression of God, and we need to do that in the way we govern, the way we raise money, and the way we manage the resources.
The Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability accredits nearly 2,000 ministries that take in nearly $25 billion in revenue annually. I'm Bill Bumpus.
Life Dynamics believes it's time for pro-life supporters to stand for the cause. Charlie Butts reports the organization has produced a way to start up a conversation.
So often, pro-life people grin and bear it when abortion supporters boldly proclaim their right to abortion. But Life Dynamics believes supporters of life should no longer be silent. There are resources available to help people understand how to defend life from natural conception to natural death, and that knowledge will assist them in delivering the pro-life message to others. Life Dynamics founder Mark Crutcher tells AFN there is another approach that can be used to draw people to you.
Well, we wanted to do something a little fresh, update all the pro-life symbolism. You know, we've had other things out there, the little precious feet, for example, and we've had those for years, and they're really good, and they've made a real impact, I think, in the pro-life movement, but we need to have something newer and something a little more updated, and so we came up with this design for this pin.
It's round with an image of a preborn baby in the womb with the stars and stripes across it.
And we've just been astonished at the reception that it's gotten so far. We've already put out almost 20,000 of those pins. So we're really excited about them, and we're making them available to people. They can get one per household for free.
There's a small charge for additional pins. When people see and ask about it, the wearer can then explain the cause for life. I'm Charlie Butts.
And a federal judge says Alabama counties must abide by court decisions allowing gay marriage. But the order does not affect counties that have stopped issuing all marriage licenses. American Family News is online.
In this day of economic uncertainty and soaring unemployment, safe investments are often hard to find. But investing in the precious metals is the safest investment of all because gold and silver is real money. Government-printed currency is not. Call Melody Cedarstrom at Discount Gold and Silver Trading Company at 1-800-375-4188. Melody has been helping people secure their financial future for over 10 years. While others in the business claim honesty, Melody will deliver. Give her a call, 1-800-375-4188. That's 800-375-4188.
Years ahead of the dominant media, FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net.
And we're back with the second hour of To Free America here on the American Freedom Network, and we still need your help, folks. Simple as that, need your help. Keep the lights on, pay the phone bill, feed the squirrel out there running in the cage in the transmitter so this signal goes out to you. Call Michael. Order a copy of today's show, 800-205-6245, 800-205-6245. That helps us out. And, well, that's as far as I'm going to give my spiel. You've heard it endlessly that we need your help. My guest today, Brent Winters, a common lawyer. His website, commonlawyer.com. Commonlawyer.com. Check it out. Wealth of information you need to, you need to add this website to your homeschooling curriculum. The Declaration of Independence, that's what we're talking about today. This show is going to rerun over Saturday. You need to get down on your face before God and repent. Let him know the sins, like Daniel did, of the nation. And ask and pray, and Lord, please do not let these sins, these abominations that are coming up before your face, be laid at my doorstep.
Randy, we were talking about impeachment a while ago.
Yes.
And that's always an option. And the question is whether the justices, in doing what they've done, did it rise to a level, as our Constitution of the United States says, does it rise to a level of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors? Well, that definition of those things is left up to Congress, except treason. Our Constitution defines treason very precisely. Of the four crimes our Constitution mentions, only does it define treason, and for an important reason. But if it isn't treason, I don't know that you could rise it or see that it had risen to that level. The question is there any bribery involved? Are there any high crimes and misdemeanors? And that is left up to the decision, the discretion of the United States Congress, most particularly within the exclusive jurisdiction of the one branch of Congress called the House of Representatives.
Okay, but no, it doesn't reside in Congress. It resides in the people. Period.
Well,
the people.
I understand.
You out there, listeners, if you're incensed about this, if this has struck to the core, the marrow of this, then it's up to us all to take Congress by the nape of the neck and say, you impeach all five of those justices that voted this abomination and the judgment of God upon this nation. That's where the power lies.
Well, I can't disagree with that. That's where the power lies, and the source of the authority is in the people. Our Constitution says that. But my point in making that was it does not lie, when I say exclusive jurisdiction of the House of Representatives, the power of impeachment does not lie with the Senate. That was what I was trying to say about that. So if the House of Representatives does impeach a justice of the Supreme Court, the Senate has no power to undo that impeachment. All the Senate can do is try the impeachment, yes or no, up or down. Yeah. And that's what I meant. I said that they have that exclusive power. Not to take away from your comments, because that's true also. But Congress, the Congress of the United States has the power to decide what is a high crime misdemeanor. That's the other side of it. The Senate has no say in that.
But back to, we went down this rabbit trail, and it's a good rabbit trail we went down. But back to the Declaration of Independence. That was a notice, because Congress, the colonies, the state legislatures of that time, the Continental Congress, had repeatedly sent redress of grievance and said, look, Parliament, look, King, you're just, we're your brethren, and we've lived along, all these years in tranquility. But now, King, you've granted these monopolies to the corporations to come in here and rape, rob, and steal our livelihoods and tax us. So the Declaration was the notice, and it was also an indictment of the crimes, wasn't it?
No question, and that's what enlivens our Constitution. Without this real case in controversy, under extreme adversity, and there has to be adversity, or the question is not sharpened. Adversity means that people have a stake in the outcome, are willing to fight about it. And that's what they're saying here. You read the first part of the Declaration. It wouldn't hurt just to quickly go over paragraph 31, because that's more particularly what you were just saying. The Declaration says, nor have we been wanting in our attention to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature, that means Parliament, to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. That means the law of the city, the civil law. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here, that means in the New World. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, that's a big word, and have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred. We're kinfolk, we're British too, to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. We've communicated with them. We've filed our petitions, our complaints, our grievances before the court of the world, and they won't hear a blame thing we're saying. They're deaf, D-E-A-F, to the voice of justice, and of our common ties of blood called consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation.
We'll be right back. Stay tuned here on the American Freedom Network.
Howdy, folks. Have you ever thought about having your own backyard chicken?
Hear it first on FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net. The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our Listen and Schedule pages on the Internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
Brent Allen Winters, my guest today. CommonLawyer.com is his website. CommonLawyer.com, a wealth of information, links to his radio shows and archives. You need to put this website, his books, in your homeschooling curriculum. You will teach your children well. Just put it that way. The Declaration of Independence established a birthright of the union of the independent and free states, which are no more. They are simple subdivisions of Washington District of Criminals now, where they said here that these united colonies and of right ought to be free and independent states. And it was that way for a while, wasn't it?
Oh, it certainly was, Randy. And actually, it was that way, but slowly, by inches, the power crept to a more central location. It's odd when I think about it. Again, going back to this legal business, lawyers are taught that the federal government only has jurisdiction within the District of Columbia, that's 10 miles square, and in federal enclaves. Federal enclaves, that's, I think, spelled E-N-C-L-A-V-E. It means federal property. Even if it's within a state, the feds have jurisdiction over their own property. And so a federal courthouse, a military installation, a dockyard that belongs to the U.S. Navy, things like that. And that's acceptable, and most lawyers understand that. But in practice, it turns into quite something else, with the feds just running everywhere they want, doing what they want, and then the state governments capitulating to that and just allowing it and saying nothing, and intimidating.
Especially the state courts. You bring an action in the state court to, keep the stinking IRS off your property, because the property is the jurisdiction of the state, and then the DOJ comes in and says, oh, we're going to move it to federal court. The state judge says, oh, yeah, well, okay, not a problem.
And that, I know I've seen that too. I understand what you're saying, and I don't see that the federal government has that jurisdiction within the state boundaries. But Justice Scalia made this point, and it's a good point. He was speaking to a group of people that were complaining about the very thing of which we speak, and he said, if you're looking to the federal government to protect states' rights, you're looking to the wrong place. Yes. And he said, if you're looking, and then he went on, he said, if you're looking to the Supreme Court to do that, you're looking to the wrong place. He said, my paycheck, as all of the folks on the Supreme Court, our paycheck comes from the Treasury of the United States. And if you're looking to us to protect states' rights, it isn't going to happen. He said, I'm just, and he didn't go ahead and elaborate on that anymore, just to make the point by using an example. But what he's saying is, if you're eating the king's bread, you're loyal to the king. Whoever's bread you're eating, as Billy Budd the sailor said in Herman Melville's little novel, Billy Budd, just before he was hung, he cried out, I have eaten the king's bread, and I'm loyal to the king. Well, whoever's buttering your bread, you're going to be loyal to them. And that's his point. And so, but beyond that, he said, The Constitution intends for the states to defend their own rights, and that is the answer, and that is what needs to be done, and that can be done. But then he added this: the states doesn't seem like they're all willing to do that, and the reason, of course, they're not willing to do that is because they're afraid. They're fearful of the power, because the federal government sends governors to prison by their federal prosecutors without what I consider, in my studied opinion, to be jurisdiction to do so.
Yes.
And if state governors don't toe the line, then they're after them.
Now, back to the indictment. There's 28 items of indictment in the Declaration of Independence.
Yes.
We don't have time to go through all of them. But if you really look at this, folks, if you really read it, and you need to get this book, the Commentary of a Common Lawyer on the Declaration of Independence. If you go through there, every single one of them is happening today to us, isn't it?
No question. That wouldn't hurt, maybe, if you'd let me. I'd just go through them real quick because I have them listed in the table of contents. And what I did, the table of contents is also the outline of the Declaration. And I didn't find anybody who set forth an outline of the Declaration of Independence, but it's organized to the IT. And to understand that organization, if you can get it in a glance, I have it on one page in a glance, then you begin to understand. Can I go through those quickly?
Oh, absolutely.
He starts out, he talks about the laws of nature and laws of nature's God in paragraph 1. Then he gives us the 6 self-evident truths, and he says these are the tests. And then he talks about the 2 duties, patience and action, and that's all under the heading the laws of nature's God. And then the facts proving tyranny. And as any good common law complaint, he sets forth the facts. Let these facts, he says, be presented to a candid world. And that's what a complaint has to do, present things as though facts, and the courts are required, or common law courts are required to take as fact all well-pleaded petitions until proven otherwise. Number 1, there are no local laws. The King of England would not allow local laws. Number 1, under that heading, there are 6 things under that heading. Paragraph 4 says local laws have been suspended. That's what the federal government's trying to do in our own country. And this is a test, of course. Are they going to try to suspend, which they just did, try to suspend marriage laws? Number 2, representation is forbidden, meaningful representation. Number 3, representatives are abused. They're not allowed to exercise their representation of the people within the states. Number 3, if they don't toe the line, they're ousted from their positions. Representatives and people running for Congress are often indicted, more than other people, by the way, without cause and sent to prison. Election of representatives banned to local government. That's what the King of England did. And then here's a big one, often overlooked. It says in paragraph 9 of our Declaration of 76 that habitation and use of land is barred. Now, let me repeat that. Habitation and use of land is barred. Land is not some things in our common law government. Land is everything. As a matter of fact, the covenants of God have no meaning without land. Land are the subject of God's covenants, and the Sabbath principle that God gives us applies only to himself, God himself. He applies it. He applies it to man, and he applies it then to that which is precious to him beyond what is his living creatures, man. He applies it to the land. And then he says, paragraph 10, the King of England has disallowed common law courts. How has he done it? By many devices, and 4 listed in our Declaration. The king has made judges dependent upon him. He has allowed bureaucrats, swarms of bureaucrats, to thwart common law in our courts. He has made peacetime army to occupy the homes of people, so the eyes and the ears of government would be in the home, just as our government's trying to do now.
Well, I want to comment on that before we before the peacetime army occupiers, okay?
Yes.
Well, we've refined ourselves a little bit. We're a little bit more civilized now. What we'll do is we'll tax the people to pay for the soldiers' houses, okay?
Yes.
And instead of the soldiers being in the houses, we're going to put the internet there, and we're going to have the iPhone there so that we can listen to everything that goes on and track your every movement. We're back to
so the principle of that Third Amendment to our Constitution prohibiting the housing of soldiers in homes applies today, right now, in a more meaningful way, as meaningful as it was then, even more meaningful today, and it's more important today because of the technological, how did you technocrat? That's what you said. The advances.
Yeah, we sold our soul and our birthright for a bowl of techno crap. So
yeah, and the government is listening, and that's what that applies. The martial law in our common law courts. That also is another device that the king was using to thwart the common law courts. So that's the first, no local laws. Second, no common law courts. Third, and this is a longer one in our declaration, but a number of abuses. It says the king, the Declaration of 76 says King George conspired with his cronies to do the following things. Number one, overlook England's Constitution. To overlook England's Constitution. They're not paying attention to it. England's Constitution is our common law. Number two, to let bureaucrats legislate. In other words, the legislation of bureaucrats is, we call that in America, regulation. Regulation. The IRS, the bureaucrats, promulgate regulations when our Constitution says only Congress has the power to legislate. And that was upheld by the courts until the administration of FDR in the 1930s. And now we're inundated with regulations. We can't even see the laws anymore. And that's what they're complaining of here. And, of course, it says the king conspired to quarter soldiers in the homes of Americans. That's paragraph 16. The king has conspired with his cronies to shield the colonists, murderers of the colonists, paragraph 17. He has conspired to cut off trade, freedom of trade. As a matter of fact, the only trade that was allowed was with the trading arm of the Bank of London. The only trade that was allowed in the colonies, and that trading arm was the British East India Company. There was no freedom of trade. It was an absolute monopoly. And then paragraph 19 says the king conspired to tax the colonists without consent. Paragraph 20, the king conspired to deny trial by jury. Paragraph 21, the king conspired to bring false criminal charges against colonists. And then paragraph 22, he conspired to spread civil canon law throughout the colonies. And I mentioned that a while ago, what's called the Quebec Act of Parliament. The Quebec Act established in Quebec the civil canon law of Rome as the law of that territory. And then, paragraph 23, the king conspired to breach charter promises, the original charters of each one of the colonies, which were common law charters. And then, paragraph 24, he conspired with his cronies to legislate by distant decree. To legislate by distant decree, not by legislation, but by the decree of an emperor. You see, King George claimed to be common law king in England. But he said he was emperor in his empire, and America was his empire. We didn't have a king. They called him King George. He was emperor, and he said so on all official documents. So at the bottom line, with all that, the king was conspiring with the British East India Company, in which he was heavily benefited as a shareholder. And then also, the British East India Company was the trading arm in control of the Bank of London, which had been established in the 1690s. And the Bank of London was controlled by the continental European banks. So it was a bad situation from start to finish. So paragraph 25 says that the king has decreed outlawry. against the colonists. That means we can kill them by law. And if we find them, that's an old common law doctrine that he abused. That's funny. He said the common law doesn't apply in the American colonies, but then used the common law doctrine of outlawry.
Okay, outlawry. It basically said, okay, all of these guys, we've made the list. Here's our red list. They're declared as outlaws. You may now shoot them on sight.
Beyond that, you're required to, yeah.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host, Melody Cedarstrom, right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
We're back. Brent Allen Winters, my guest today, a common lawyer. You can find his website, commonlawyer.com. Commonlawyer.com. Wealth of information, radio archives there, and you need to add this website, commonlawyer.com, to your homeschooling curriculum because, well, if you leave your children in the public fool system, that's what you're going to have, are public fools. Going over the Declaration of Independence and how we sold our birthright, but let's bring it home, Brent, to today. In the table of contents in your little book here, United States Constitution, Declaration of Independence, A common lawyer comments clause by clause. The king conspired with his cronies. That we could lay that today to NAFTA and GATT and WTO and this Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Atlantic Partnership. All exactly the same thing, isn't it?
I see it as the same, and it is analogous to what happened according to the Declaration of Independence. It was this same problem, fundamentally, that our Declaration complains of. The British East India Company was the trading arm of the Bank of London, and the Bank of London controlled the country because even the British Army and Navy, their chief task was to protect the British East India Company. At any given moment, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the British East India Company had over 2,400 merchant ships on the high seas. That doesn't mean there were 2,400 merchant ships, some of them in port and some of them on the high seas. That means there were 2,400 on the high seas alone. There were many other merchant ships, and they were in heated competition with the Dutch East India Company, which boasted of about the same amount of ships on the high seas at any given time. So they forbade the colonies to do anything that the British East India Company didn't give them permission to do. And, of course, they were controlled by the bankers. So it came back to a monopoly of trade. And as Edward Coke, quoted more than any other man, by the way, by those who framed our Constitution and signed our Declaration, he was a justice in England. He was a champion of the common law. And he said that the common law is against monopolies. And the reason it's against the monopolies is because monopolies are against the right of the individual. There is no other rights in this world, never has been, never will be, no other fundamental rights except those that are individual. There are no group rights. There are no rights of unions and associations. That's all doublespeak. It's all deceit intended to control people. Rights only, God gives them direct, fundamental rights, direct to the individual. And as Wycliffe said, our relationship with God is direct to God, and the responsibility we answer direct back to Him, not through any other mediator, but direct to God, because of our responsibilities we call rights. And the Declaration does a good job of defining those rights, calling them duties. There are rights, and he says duties. We need to look at our Declaration as a declaration, and it's not a Declaration of Independence, and that phrase appears nowhere in the document. It doesn't even appear in the title. It is a declaration of utter dependence, and that is clear in the document. Utter dependence. It is a shifting of dependence from the Crown of England to the Supreme Judge of all the world, as our Declaration puts it, to the God of all creation, the Creator. And our dependence upon Him is what makes us appear to be independent of men, and that's what we want. I remember when I left home, my granddad, we used to drive over to the other place, and he'd come by and get me. We'd go feed the cows. He did this every day for years. The hardway place, we called it. We had land over there a little more rolling. You put a few cows on it. And I was getting ready to leave the next day, and before he left me, he said, "Brent, I want you to remember something." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Be your own man." And I was pretty young, and I didn't know what he meant exactly, but I had an idea. But now I'm much older, and I know exactly what he meant. Be your own man. That means do not be dependent for your opinions. Do not substitute the ideas of another man for your own in fundamental things. Make sure you work hard all your life to understand and come to your own conclusion. And it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of time to become your own man. It's a matter of fact, the evil empire will mitigate against that at every point to try to stop you from becoming your own man. It'll try to substitute another God, another opinion, say, "Well, I believe that." Why? Well, because that's what I believe. He said it, and I believe it. I like him. He's smart. Well, no. When in the final day, you're not going to be able to say, "Well, this other guy told me it was okay," or this other group of men, the Supreme Court, the Pope of Rome, the Congress of the United States said it was okay. That's not good enough. God's going to say, you're responsible to make the right decision. And when it comes to Declaration 76, these men were declaring, we're depending on God. And we look, it says at the end, to the Supreme Judge of all the world for the rectitude of our intentions. We're depending on Him, and we believe what we're doing is right, not because any man told us, but because God has revealed that to us. Therefore, we're back to those 2 volumes in the beginning of the Declaration of 76, the laws of nature. And the laws of nature is God. Nature tells us what the Supreme Court did is not only wrong, it is a crime. Nature tells us that. Then the Bible cinches it in no uncertain black and white letter terms. And those are the 2 volumes, our declaration, to which our declaration appeals, that we must appeal to. We have sold our birthright. Our birthright, yes. Those 2 volumes, the laws of nature, that's our common law. The laws of nature is God, written in our Bibles. The first to be observed and to be recognized, as the Bible tells us. The second, to be heard, read, and ruminated. And we won't enjoy the blessings of freedom unless we do that. It's time to come back to fundamental things. Some people will say, well, that's pathetic. People have been poo-pooing the Declaration of Independence for years. There are even those in government and the courts who've even said it's not part of our law. It's a funny thing. It's part of our organic law, says the Congress of the United States by official declaration. The Declaration of 76 is part of our most fundamental law, out of which all other law arises. And let's say again, without the Declaration of 76, our Constitution is a dry and dispirited skeleton of mere words.
Well, if they deny this, that the Declaration is not part of our law, then why, for the Enabling Act of Colorado, they wrote in here and said, hey, you can do your Constitution and your state government, and you can do all of this as long as it's Republican in form, and you don't make no distinction in civil political rights on account of race, color, except for Indian not taxed, be not repugnant to the Constitution and the principles of the Declaration of Independence.
And you're quoting from an official proclamation of the state of Colorado?
This is the Enabling Act passed by Congress to allow the people of Colorado to form their state.
Oh, I got you now. Well, there it is then. That makes it pretty clear. The Declaration of...
We're on our next break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after these brief messages. Stay tuned, folks.
Years ahead of the dominant media, FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net. The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Years ahead of the dominant media, FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net.
back. Randy Yarbrough with you. My guest, Brent Allen Winters, a common lawyer. His website, commonlawyer.com. commonlawyer.com, going over the Declaration of 76 and the, instead of dependence upon the man, dependence upon God Almighty to see them through this. But everything in here that's been done, or they've talked about, the indictment, all the presentments, all of the facts presented to a candid world, all of these things are absolutely happening today. In here, it says in your table of contents, to overlook England's Constitution. We could take that today to overlook the constitutions of the states, to let bureaucrats legislate. Well, let's see. We got the IRS, the FDA, the EPA, on and on and on.
I don't even know. There's so many alphabet soup bureaucracies. We're overloaded, we're inundated, we're overwhelmed, and they all promulgate regulations not by the page but by the poundage of pages. And there's no way anybody can have a clue what's going on.
And we can take that right down to the local level. If you wanted to repaint your house and you started on it, and the code enforcement officer said, well, the regulation says you had to come get a permit to paint your house.
Well, it is odd. We used to collect all the junk we had. We had different piles, and Dad would say at home, well, throw that on the iron pile. We'll throw that on the lumber pile. We'll throw that on the woven wire fence pile. If we had anything left over that was not to be used anymore, we threw it in the pile. Well, if it stayed there long enough, we even had a baling wire pile. I kid you not, Randy, our baling wire pile that we piled baling wire on after feeding the cows, it was as big as a pickup truck or as high as one, and it was piled up against a large maple tree outside the barn lot. But eventually we'd take that when it got big enough, any of those piles, if it was something that we couldn't use anymore, and we'd get a little more use out of it by putting it in a wash so the topsoil wouldn't wash away off the field.
Yeah.
We'd put it in a place where the erosion was prone to be, and we'd try to stop it. I don't know. I assume there's got to be a law against that now, but of course what we were doing was trying to save the natural resource of the topsoil.
You were trying to be the steward that the Lord said, be steward over my land.
Correct. And I had a guy email me, and he said, I remember coming over to your house, and somehow we'd connected over the Internet. And this is talking about boys when they were little boys. He said, I remember getting up in the morning, and we'd run outside and take a leak off the front porch. And I thought to myself, yeah, that is the way we used to do, boys.
Yeah.
And it was convenient, of course, for little boys. But I imagine now that there's a statute against that, and I think it was put through by Al Gore, and the operative phrase is you can't release any deleterious material into the environment. And if you do, it carries a possible 20 years. There's another one of those almost 6,000 crimes the federal government has no jurisdiction to pass.
Yeah.
And I do know of men that have gone to federal prison because somebody found an expended paint can behind their house. I do know of that. That does happen. Those are the kind of things we're facing, and the things the Declaration talks about. We should go back and read, and of course, I've looked at it before, but in writing it makes you contemplate it a little more, and I see that it is all applicable.
Well, and here to shield the murderers of the colonists, all we have to do is go to 1993, Waco, and Ruby Ridge.
Yes, and that is exactly what the federal government did, and they did it with impunity. They murdered over 30 children, obviously knew what they were doing. It didn't have to be done. It was a show of ugliness to scare people is all it was, at the expense, at the sacrifice of children, just as the Israelites used to burn babies to death to Baal in the valley of Gehenna. And God doesn't tolerate stuff like that forever. It's bad enough it happens once. He is tolerant. But when the cup gets full, and he has a line on his cup called his cup of wrath, the Bible says when the cup gets full, he draws the line and drops the hammer. He is more committed to retribution against violation of his laws now, in our times, the writer to the Hebrews says in the Newer Testament, than he was even back in the old times, the Older Testament. And the reason is this, because we today have the most complete and fullest revelation of the gospel of God and his Messiah. We have it in the Gospels, we have the epistles. They didn't have that. We know exactly what's going on. We have no excuse at this point. And God is going to deal with us in more harsh terms, the writer of the Hebrews says, than he dealt with men in the Older Testament, as ugly as it appears to us. If we can't get that through our heads, we're going to suffer the consequences. I, for one, want to speak out against what's happening. I'm no part of it, and I know, talking to you, you're not either. But I want to say so, because it's important we say it. I'm not part of this madness, this homosexual, sodomistic, what is it, a selling of our birthright, just to go along and get along. No, not me. God said no. I'm not going that way. I'm staying here. As for me and my own, I'm going to teach them as best I can not to go that way. And I encourage other people to do it also, because your future depends upon it. And if we have any conviction at all, if we are men, if we're going to be our own men, and we're going to follow the mind of God and be dependent upon him, and be independent, for crying out loud, independent of the beggarly weakness, not only of ourselves, but of others, we must learn, keep, and do the standards of God. That won't save us. I know it won't save us. Christ saves. But he saves us that we will be able to do that, empowers us to do it.
Well, and for those that call on the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, what are you consenting to? Right here, the Declaration, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Ask yourself what you're consenting to. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Finish off today's show here on the American Freedom Network.
Howdy, folks. Have you ever thought about having your own backyard chickens?
I pledge allegiance to the King of Kings, and to his kingdom come, on earth as it is in heaven. One holy nation, under Heavenly Father, grace, mercy, justice for all.
Gold and silver is tremendously undervalued. Global demand vastly exceeds mine supply by more than 60% annually. There is little in the financial world more certain than a coming explosion in the prices of gold and silver. The U.S. dollar continues to lose value and respect as the world's reserve currency. Our nation faces challenges on many fronts, and a day doesn't pass without another economist bringing forth warnings of impending economic calamity. There has never been a better time than right now to acquire physical gold and silver. Discount Gold and Silver Trading was founded on the principles of truth and honesty. We believe in providing a quality product, quality service, and most importantly, competitive pricing. We provide all forms of precious metals, including American gold, silver, platinum, and rare investment and circulated coins. Silver bars, rounds, and 90% silver bags are on hand for the silver investor. Gold self-directed IRAs are available. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, that's 1-800-375-4188. If you'd like to get a copy of this program, you may subscribe at FirstAmendmentRadio.com for only $45 a month, and you'll receive an MP3 CD weekly of all of our programs. As a bonus, we'll send you a password for our audio archives online. That's a $15 value. Or you may request any month of any program on one MP3 CD for a minimum donation of only $25, or any single program on tape, MP3 CD, or CD for only $15. You may do all of this online at FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Just follow the instructions to make a donation or subscribe. You may also adopt an hour of your favorite program. Please don't forget that most of the programs on FirstAmendmentRadio.com are listener-supported. Don't do Internet? Then call 559-781-3773 and we'll be honored to help you. Thank you from all of us here at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
Now, therefore, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the flood and in Egypt, and serve ye the Lord. And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom ye will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And the people answered and said, God forbid that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. For the Lord our God, He it is that brought us up and our fathers out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage, in which did those great signs in our sight, and preserved us in all the way wherein we went, and among all the people through whom we passed. Joshua chapter 24, verses 14 through 17.
Wow, that's excellent, and it should be repeated. Now, some people will say, well, that's the Old Testament. That has nothing to do with me. No. That has everything to do with you. That's the way God deals with people. And his covenants of obedience, those are the covenants, those are the conditions of land tenancy. God gives the blessing that he gives to men, his people, through his promise. That's the book of Galatians. He makes that clear. The promise is not something you can purchase. It is by last will and testament God gives you, and he gave the Israelites that particular parcel of real estate called the land of Canaan. He gave it to them. But then he said there are conditions of your tenancy. And that's what Joshua was talking about there. And the conditions of land tenancy: do not purchase the land. I recently was involved in a situation where someone who had tenancy of a house was not allowed to bring a dog into the house. Now, that particular covenant, that was a condition of the tenancy of that land. It did not purchase the person's right to stay there, but if he violated that and brought a dog on the property, he was going to get thrown out, and that's exactly what happened. And that's the way God is. He has conditions called covenants to his promises. His promise is without cost. He gives it freely. You don't pay for it. You can't buy it. It's impossible to buy God's salvation and his gift of land. But with that promise comes conditions, and that's what Joshua was talking about there, and that principle applies to us also today. For living upon this land we call the United States. The territory that we here in where we live, each of the separate sovereign states has a territory, and with the condition of staying on God, it's God's land. It's not ultimately ours. He is the Lord, the earth. It says that word translated earth in the old King James, the word utterance, it means land. The land, all the land of the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. That means the yield, the production, the wealth that emanates from the land belongs to the Lord. And he allows us tenancy, calls us freeholders. That's what our common law calls it. And with that, that's what Joshua was talking about there. And they said, those people said, oh, yeah, we'll do all that. Well, if we haven't done that, as they didn't, God will eject us. He will eject us from this land we call America. He'll do something to us. He'll bring in a foreign power. I don't know what he'll do. I shouldn't speculate and say, I know. I don't have a clue. I just know God's law cannot be broken. And if we think we're breaking it, we're kidding ourselves, because in due time, the consequences of his law will come down on us. I heard somebody say recently, Randy, that you can't break the laws of God, and he said the proof of that is you can't jump off of a 30-story building and expect to live.
Yeah.
He called that, Randy, jumping to a conclusion.
Jumping to a conclusion. Brent Winters, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Randy.
God bless, and hang in there. And remember, folks, the question is not, do you know the Lord Jesus Christ? The question is, does he know you?
And of his fullness we have all received, and grace for grace.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host, Melody Cedarstrom, right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit DiscountGoldAndSilverTrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188. Hear it first on FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net.